Hey guys, I wanted to do a video on 7.03 international trade, the first task for 7.03, because this is a little difficult, so I wanted to kind of explain it and hopefully it'll help you out. You need to be familiar with this graph right here. Not so much these sections in the middle, really, for right now, but you do need to know the supply curve goes this way, this is a demand curve, and you need to know these terms over here, okay? Your PW is your world price. If you're taking notes while you watch this, which, to be honest with you, I would recommend that, so you can refer back to them later. That would actually be really good. But PW is the world price, or kind of like the base price for everything. If you look at the your task here, you'll see assume the world price for widgets is $9. So that 9 would be your PW. So I went ahead and labeled that up here, and we're going to label the rest of the graph as well. You also need to know QWD, that is the domestic supply, or what the country has. So like we're talking about the U.S., that's how many the U.S. can supply at that price. So in this case, 20 would be your QWD. And your QW is the total quantity people would buy. So it's where price and quantity meet on the demand curve. And so in this scenario, that's going to be 100. So I've already labeled those three things for you. Now, moving up to PT. Okay, PT is basically the price with a tax or tariff on it. And whenever you're working out these problems, it's going to tell you how much that is. Like, for example, question 1 right here tells you they place a $3 tariff on it. Well, 9 plus 3 is 12. So 12 is going to be your PT. Okay, your QTD is going to be where your price with a tariff and the quantity meet on the supply curve. It's going to be right there. And in this case, it's going to be 40. And then your QT is going to be where the PT and quantity meet on the demand curve. So in this case, it's going to be 80. Okay, and then we also have PD, which is the price equilibrium. Okay, in this case, that is going to be 15. And your QD is going to be the quantity demanded at that price, and they perfectly meet where supply and demand intersect. So in this case, that's going to be 60. And then another one that isn't really talked about as much, but we're going to call PM, is going to be your max price. So up here, that's going to be 20. Okay, so to calculate, let's calculate some things. To calculate the number of imports, okay, I'm just going to come down here. Actually, I'm going to make a PowerPoint slide. To calculate number of imports, what you would do is you would subtract QD from QW, which basically would be QW minus QD equals total imports. And I hate when it does this. Okay, to calculate the number of imports with a tax, you would subtract QTD from QT. So it's going to be equals total imports. Okay, to calculate revenue without tax, you would subtract QWD from QW and then multiply it by PW. And now that is turned into QW minus QWD times PW. And I think we kind of overthought this and made this harder than it actually was. So I'm going to kind of look at the first one with you. If the government places a $3 tariff on all foreign produced widgets, the total domestic production will be. Okay, well, we know that the tariff, that's going to raise it to PT, so it's going to be 12. And QTD is going to be your domestic produce. Supply domestic, what you can supply domestically. So if we go over to where QTT is, well, that's 40. That's going to be your answer to number 1, 40. Okay, it's number 2 where you start going into the math, and that's where we just talked about calculating number of imports with a tax and calculating revenue without tax. And look, I have all this in the module. It should say 703 task 1. It's a PDF, and it has all these notes. I'm going over what all of these things mean, how to calculate revenue. And this is what I wanted to show you because it's easier to show than understand. I'm sorry, not show than understand, show than me talk. Okay. Especially for numbers 4 and 5, when you're looking at the value of consumer surplus and the value of producer surplus and all of that, there's some things you have to do. And it shows you in this PDF. You basically have to make a triangle. Consumer surplus with free trade, you go from PM all the way down to PW, all the way over to QW, and then you connect them across the demand curve. And so then to calculate that, you would use this formula, 1/2 times base times height. Okay, your base is going to be your QW, okay, because it starts at 0 and goes all the way here. Your height is going to be PM minus PW. Okay, if we were going all the way down here, then it would just be PM, but it's not. So we have to do PM minus PW. And then you would multiply that times 1/2. So for example, here our QW is 100. So we would do 100. We got to figure out PM minus PW. So PM is 20, PW is 9, so 20 minus 9 is 11. So you would do 100 times 11 times 1/2. Okay, in a closed economy, you do at the very top PM to PD, you go to QD, connect on the demand curve. Because a closed economy means you can't import things. You're not dealing with foreign trade. And then you would use the same formula, except this time your base would be QD and your height would be PM minus PD. So for this, PM is 20 minus PD is 15, so that's 5. Our QD would be 60, and then we'd multiply 5 times 60 times 1/2. Now for producer surplus, your triangle is kind of upside down, okay? In free trade, you start at PW and you go down to the corner. You start at PW and go over to QWD, and so you make this little triangle, and then you do the same thing, except now you don't have to multiply because you start at PW and went down to 0. So our PW is 9, our QWD is 20, so you do 9 times 20 times 1/2. For producer surplus in a closed economy, you would start at PD and go all the way to 0. And then you would go over to QD, and then you would connect them on the supply curve. And you do 1/2 times base times height, your base being QD, your height being PD. So for us, that would be 60 times 15 times 1/2. And so those things will help you figure out numbers 4 and 5, making sure you know that. Now, for a question like number 6, now you're calculating revenue with tax. To calculate revenue with tax, you would, now, you kind of switch things up a little bit. You would subtract PW from PT and then multiply by QTD. They look like this. So like in this instance, PT minus PW 12 minus 3, QTD is 40, 3 times 40. And the rest of the questions for this, I think you should be able to answer kind of looking at these notes. These should help you out tremendously. So just kind of let me know if you have any other questions, and I'll be happy to help.